Well, good afternoon and welcome to Stonemont Church on this Good Friday. Today we're going to be reading about the crucifixion of Christ. For those of you who are with us for the first time, welcome. We're glad to have you here. It seems a little bit odd to many who aren't familiar with it that this day is called Good Friday. A lot of people are confused. I was for most of my life. Nobody ever explained it to me really until I looked it up myself and found out that good comes from the Old English word which meant holy. So in this we can think of this as Holy Friday. It's the day on which we think about and remember the crucifixion of Jesus. The Bible tells us that Jesus died in our earthly understanding at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not yet 3 o'clock in the afternoon here where I am in middle America, but it's past 3 o'clock in Israel where this happened. So we are in that time period. I'm going to be reading today from the Gospel of John. Chapters 19 and 20 is going to be about we're going to hear, actually we're just going to read 19. I'll be reading 20 on Easter, on Sunday. We're going to hear about the process, what went on here. If you're not familiar with the story, I'm going to read today from the New Living Translation. It's the translation that I prefer because it's more easily understood than the King James and even some of the others. It makes a pastor sound smart when he reads from the King James, but if it's not easily understood by those hearing it, what purpose does it serve? And the purpose is not for a pastor to look smart, but for the people to understand. We're going to join this here when the Jews have brought Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor, and wanting him to crucify Jesus. Then Pilate had Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip. If any of you have seen Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, that brings it home in a way that I think many people never really understood or visualized, and I would very much advise watching that. The soldiers made a crown of long, sharp thorns and put it on his head, and they put a purple robe on him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they mocked, and they hit him with their fists. Pilate went out again and said to the people, "I am going to bring him out to you now, but understand clearly that I find him not guilty." Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said, "Here is the man." When they saw him, the leading priests and temple guards began shouting, "Crucify, crucify." "You crucify him," Pilate said. "I find him not guilty." The Jewish leaders replied, "By our laws he ought to die because he called himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was more frightened than ever. He took Jesus back into the headquarters again and asked him, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave no answer. "You won't talk to me?" Pilate demanded. "Don't you realize that I have the power to release you or to crucify you?" Then Jesus said, "You would have no power over me at all unless it were given to you from above. So the one who brought me to you has the greater sin." Then Pilate tried to release him, but the Jewish leaders told him, "If you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar. Anyone who declares himself a king is a rebel against Caesar." When they said this, Pilate brought Jesus out to them again. Then Pilate sat down on the judgment seat on the platform that is called the stone pavement, in Hebrew, Gabbatha. It was now about noon of the day of preparation for the Passover, and Pilate said to the people, "Here is your king." Away with him, they yelled. Away with him. Crucify him. What? Crucify your king? Pilate asked. We have no king but Caesar, the leading priest shouted back. Then Pilate gave Jesus to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus and led him away. Carrying the cross by himself, Jesus went to the place called Skull Hill, in Hebrew Golgotha. There they crucified him. There were 2 others crucified with him, one on either side with Jesus between them, and Pilate posted a sign over him that read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. The place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, so that many people could read it. Then the leading priest said to Pilate, change it from King of the Jews to, he said, I am King of the Jews. Pilate replied, what I have written, I have written. It stays exactly as it is. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they divided his clothes among the 4 of them. They also took his robe, but it was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. So they said, let's not tear it, but throw dice to see who gets it. This fulfilled the scripture that said, they divided my clothes among themselves and threw dice for my robe. Other translations say threw lots. So that is what they did. Standing near the cross were Jesus' mother, his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother standing there beside the disciple he loved, he said to her, woman, he is your son. And he said to his disciple, this disciple, she is your mother. And from then on, this disciple took her into his home. I'll pause there for a second and explain something. Many people don't understand this reference to the disciple that Jesus loved. Didn't Jesus love all of his disciples? Yes, he did. He did infinitely, just as he loved everyone else and loves us. This was written by John, the disciple John, who is the author of the Gospel of John and John 1 and 2 and the Revelation. And he never refers to himself in this in first person. The reasons for that have been argued improperly by many. But he does that in order to take the focus off of himself and keep it where it belongs on Jesus. So his reference to the disciple that Jesus loved in no means minimizes the love Jesus had for any other disciple or any other person. But he refers to himself in the third person, as you hear here, this disciple took her into his home. The reference, what he's talking about here is his existence as the salvation of Jesus. That Jesus took him in all his wildness, because we're told that he was wild. And Jesus, through love, redeemed him. And so when he's talking about the disciple that Jesus loved, he's not trying to single himself out at all. He's giving honor to the fact that Jesus loved him so much that he saved him. Does that make sense? So a lot of people can be put off by that. And again, that's not something that's often explained, but you should understand it. So you'll hear this a number of times, the disciple who Jesus loved. It's almost every time he says that, it's just like him saying it. I thank him so much for loving me and saving me. But the focus is not me. That's not why. So you're never going to hear him say I in here. I. You're never going to hear him say that, because he's always going to keep the focus on Christ. Okay. Jesus knew that everything was now finished, and to fulfill the scriptures, he said, I am thirsty. A jar of sour wine was sitting there, so they soaked a sponge in it, put it on a hyssop branch, and held it up to his lips. When Jesus had tasted it, he said, it is finished. Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. These are a couple of the things that are referred to as the last words of Jesus. And there is one that's contained in another book that is totally misunderstood by most. And you may have heard it when it says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I'm going to do a separate message on that because it's worthy of an entire message. It does not mean at all what people think it means. So he bowed his head and gave up the spirit. In the King James, it says, gave up the ghost. And that's what causes a lot of people to have misunderstandings about it. So we'll continue. The Jewish leaders didn't want the victims hanging there the next day, which was the Sabbath, and a very special Sabbath at that, because it was the Passover. So they asked Pilate to hasten the deaths by ordering that their legs be broken. Now, the reason for that is because the way they were crucified, crucifixion actually killed through suffocation. And they were mounted on the cross, some tied, some nailed, some in different fashions, and there were some that had some say that there was a foot block there that they could hold themselves up a little bit to allow themselves to take a breath. Others maintain that there was a seat of sorts that they could, but when they rested on that, they would put tremendous pain on themselves, and then they would try to lift themselves up and breathe again, but they could only maintain themselves, sustain them in that position for so long, and then they would go back, and their diaphragm would be compressed, and they wouldn't be able to breathe. So it was a torturous execution. It's up and can be very prolonged. So that's what they're saying here. They ordered that the legs be broken so they could not lift themselves back up to take a breath, and so that would hasten their deaths. Then the bodies would be taken down. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the two men crucified with Jesus. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was dead already, so they didn't break his legs. Okay, Jesus didn't die from the crucifixion. He gave his life. His life wasn't taken from him. He gave it. One of the soldiers, however, pierced his side with a spear, and blood and water flowed out. This report is from an eyewitness giving an accurate account. It is presented so that you also can believe. These things happened in fulfillment of the scriptures that say, not one of his bones will be broken, and they will look on him who they pierced. Afterward, Joseph of Arimathea, who had been a secret disciple of Jesus because he had feared the Jewish leaders, asked Pilate for permission to take Jesus' body down. When Pilate gave him permission, he came and took the body away. Nicodemus, the man who had come to Jesus at night, also came, bringing about 75 pounds, others, I think the King James says 100 pounds, it doesn't matter, of embalming ointment made from myrrh and aloes. Together they wrapped Jesus' body in a long linen cloth with the spices, as is the Jewish custom of burial. The place of crucifixion was near a garden, where there was a new tomb never used before. And so, because it was the day of preparation before the Passover, and since the tomb was close at hand, they laid Jesus there. So that brings us through the crucifixion of Christ. We pick up on Sunday. I'll read the resurrection. There is so much there that demands our attention and points us in the direction that we should go, totally void of confusion. Many people are confused with so much in the Bible. The Bible is not confusing. It's clear, it's plain. It delivers a simple message. And again, I can go back to John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And today we read, and on this Good Friday, Holy Friday, that he gave his Son. And his Son gave himself when he gave up his Spirit. For those of you who are with us over on the Patreon channel of Stonemont Church, I've put up a sermon from John MacArthur, an excellent sermon, of course, as you would expect from Dr. MacArthur, on the resurrection. If you are with us on Stonemont Church Patreon channel, it's there for you. I think you would do well to watch it. You will enjoy. You will learn a lot from it. If you're not with us, we welcome you to come join us if you would like. If you don't, you can find his sermon on YouTube. Just put in John MacArthur Resurrection or Grace to You or Grace Church or something like that, and I'm sure you'll find it. But in any case, think about this today, this day, this Good Friday, this Holy Friday, what God gave for you, what he gave for all of us, what his Son gave, the purpose of it, the necessity of it, and the result of it, which was the forgiveness of the sins of those who would accept his sacrifice in full payment for those sins and accept him as their Lord and Savior. So with that in mind, you all have a good Holy Friday, and we will see you this Sunday on Easter. Bye-bye.